acquisition of the Redlair Plant Conservation Preserve. My name is David Welch, and I'm the administrator for the Plant Conservation Program. We're part of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services in the Plant Industry Division. And before I get started a little bit, I just want to give some thanks to those who helped put this event on. First, the Rankins for providing such a beautiful spot here for us to enjoy. I also want to thank the Catawba Land Conservancy and the Friends of Plant Conservation for putting together all of these resources that we have, the chairs, the audiovisual, as well as the brownies and lemonade. And I want to especially thank Kathy Schlosser and Nancy Stewart for kind of doing yeoman's work for putting all this lovely things together. The Plant Conservation Program, with its preserves, typically preserve imperiled plants, and at the Redlair Preserve, that example is the big-leaf magnolia. What's special about Redlair, however, is the community that is surrounding the Redlair. The community of individuals made up of neighbors, of government, of nonprofits, and I'm proud and thankful that the Rankins have included the Plant Conservation Program in this community. And what you'll hear today is several different speakers which will, I think, demonstrate this community. Our first speaker today is Dr. Richard Reich. He's the Deputy Commissioner for Agriculture, for Agricultural Services. He is going to be talking a little bit about the significance of Redlair to the department and to the state in general. Please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Richard Reich.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Welch. Is that going to work?
Yep.
Yes. Just like it's supposed to, huh? Good afternoon. What a great day in Gaston County. Wow. And so good to see you all here. This is a great group, and I commend you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and to be a part of this special occasion. It's really a celebration. And I'm here on behalf of Commissioner of Agriculture Steve Troxler, and I have to tell you, he's actually fighting his own battle of land preservation today. It'll probably even be on the news. There's a project called Project Haystack in Guilford County, eastern Guilford County, and I know he's up there today fighting for farmland and forest and agriculture land preservation for the future. But I certainly want to bring greetings from, welcome you on behalf of Commissioner Troxler and bring greetings on his behalf. And I want to thank you for coming because this is a great day of celebration. We're very excited about the addition of the Redlair Plant Conservation Preserve to our Plant Conservation Program. Before I get into my specific comments, I'd like to recognize the people that are here from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and if they would raise their hands. We have a good group here, and it takes all these folks. Many of them, most of them, thank you, are with our Plant Industry Division, and because they take the leadership in our Plant Conservation program, as David has indicated. But we also have folks that work in legal and property and construction that help us with any of our land acquisitions and land management. And so all of these folks are very important to that process, and I sincerely thank them for what they do every day, not just on days like today. We don't just view this as a celebration for this for the North Carolina program. We view this as a celebration for future generations of all North Carolinians, because days like today, when we're setting aside land that will, and forest and plant material that will be preserved and protected and taken care of for years to come, we think that's such a critical part of the role we play in the conservation community. We celebrate the addition of this preserve because the conservation of imperiled plants is important to the needs of people, to the interest of science, and to the economy of our state. Plant conservation efforts focus on issues of today, but with a broader vision to the future, clearly something the Rankin family understands and celebrates with us today. We are honored that they have entrusted this land and its care to our plant conservation program. The Redlair Preserve is a tremendous gift. We know it's the site, it's the home of the state-threatened big leaf magnolia David mentioned, as well as other federally protected plants. It's the 23rd preserve in our state program, and I join David in thanking the Rankin family on behalf of the department. The North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is committed to protecting and preserving our endangered and threatened plants through our plant conservation program. And I know we have several members of the plant conservation, the Friends of Plant Conservation, some of the technical boards and other folks that are involved in that program and work with us in a wide range of ways. This program actually started in 1979, and I'm proud that to be able to say today that this program now manages more than 13,000 acres, with the Redlair Preserve being the latest addition to that. Efforts to protect and preserve our natural resources are more important than ever. We see it every day with farmland, just as we see it with these sites that have endangered or threatened species. Development pressure in North Carolina is already strong, especially around our urban areas. I don't know if you know, but we have about 100,000 more people in North Carolina every year in recent years, and you know our population is growing fast, and it's likely to continue growing in the future, in the years to come. And we know that that's going to be a problem we're all going to have to deal with, not just in North Carolina, but in the world as our population worldwide continues to grow. But we applaud the Rankins and their desire to protect this land from development so that future generations can enjoy these plants and these habitats, or this habitat. Thank you for coming today, for your partnership on conservation projects and your continued support of our conservation efforts. Most of all, I found that in groups like this, there are so many people who bring their passion and bring their leadership to special events, special things today like we're celebrating. And that is something that I never want to take for granted. I know, I can just tell, I've seen several of you at other functions and other meetings, and I know you care about these things deeply. And that's something that we need to all continue to share our passion. Share your story of conservation, what it means to you, why it's important to you, why it's important to our future. Because those are the kinds of things that so many people overlook in the busyness and the wear and tear of every day. So many times we forget things like conservation. And so I just want to again thank the Rankins for their hospitality today. Thank them for their tremendous gift to the state and to the future generations to come. Thank our partners. All of you are our partners in conservation, and thank you to our staff. Our plant industry division and our plant conservation program look forward to working with the Rankins and with the whole Redlair community for the protection of this preserve and for the benefit of future generations. I have to tell you one more thing. About a year and a half ago, we became grandparents. And I'll be honest with you. Everybody told me being a grandparent was going to be wonderful. But I told them they're wrong. They're wrong. It's far better than wonderful. I mean, it really is. How many of you are parents? How many of you are grandparents? Isn't it wonderful? What I have started to learn is that the most important, and one of the biggest joys I have in my life now is a little boy. Of course, I've experienced that before, but it's just different this time. And y'all, you grandparents, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, what I've said in some of the conservation meetings in particular, and I've said it in some other meetings too, because it really applies across the board and across life. And that is, to me, when I go to work every day, and when I share some of my story, whether it's from growing up on the farm or what we're trying to do now at our farm, or what it's to do with the conservation community. Now, a lot of what my priority are is about Henry. And Henry's my little grandson. And so I would challenge you to use your son or daughter or grandson or daughter in your message that you might have for other folks to help them understand the importance of clean air and clean water and productive soils and protected animals and protected plants and protected habitats, because really we're going to need that more than ever in the future. And the importance of this, of days like today, is really more critical than it's ever been. So again, Mr. Rankin, Mrs. Rankin, and others, thank you. The sister.
I'm here.
She's hiding in the back. Another brother. I didn't get to meet you all, but thank you all, your family. Thank you all for what you've done, and what you are doing, and what you'll continue to do, because this is not just another gift. This is a very important one, and it'll serve not only this community and this part of the state, but it'll be a great legacy for your family. And I'm proud that I could be a part of this today. So, thank you.
Okay, so next we're going to have Dave Cable, who is a Charlotte environmental leader. He's been Executive Director for the Catawba Lands Conservancy and is now Executive Director for Charlotte Trees. And he's going to speak a little bit about the Redlair community.
Thank you, David. What a treat to be here and be amongst friends for this glorious celebration. I talked to Haywood yesterday. I said, Haywood, you know, I've got 3 minutes to say something. What should I make sure to cover? And he said, well, talk a little bit about what this means. And you know, I really don't know what this project means. Here we are, 15 miles from Trade Tryon, 750 acres owned by the state, surrounded by another 700 acres by the Conservancy, protected by the Conservancy and Clean Water Management Trust Fund. 2.4 million people in the region. We wind the clock forward 30, 40 years. What does this place really mean? All I can tell you is it's profound. And what an incredible joy and unique opportunity it has been to be part of this whole process. And early on, when I joined the Conservancy, I learned that conservation is not an act, it's really a process. And Haywood, this was a process, wasn't it? This was really a process, but we got through it. And you know, I just want to tell you from a very personal standpoint what an incredible joy it was to be part of the team to help bring us to this point. And it's not an exaggeration to say that for me in my life, this is one of the most profound and meaningful things I've ever been involved in, particularly within the context of what this means long-term in the community. Nothing is perpetual, but this is about as close as we're ever going to get with all the layers of protection that we put on this property. It's a very unique situation. I mean, Redlair is a very unique property. The community, the village that it took to make the ownership situation align to allow us to sit here today and celebrate this. The coming together of the Conservancy's interest, Clean Water Management Trust Fund, the Friends Group, the state of Vermont, all of the private entities that are involved in this. That is extremely unique and would not have happened without some incredible leadership on the part of Rob Evans and David Welch and Tom Okel, and of course Haywood and Jim Stansel, and Bob Peet. Another really unique part of the collaboration is the research and the education component of what has already started here at Redlair, and I think the system is set up to allow that to continue in perpetuity. There's educational opportunities going on here. Colleges, universities have been involved and will continue to be involved. They've got a laboratory that's not going to move on them. It's not going to deteriorate like a 30 or 40-year-old building will. It's going to be here for them. And the Redlair Stewardship Committee is designed to oversee those activities. And that's a village around the continuation of the efforts to conserve Redlair, and that making the project very unique. Then there's the whole permanence of this, the conservation easements, the involvement by Clean Water Management Trust Fund, the ownership by the state, hopefully the eventual inclusion as a nature preserve, all layers of protection to help ensure that this will be here. The Redlair Foundation, and I'm honored to be part of that, is established with the generosity of the Rankins to ensure perpetuity of the funding mechanism to ensure that this property can not only be maintained but be used to its highest and best use for the education and research opportunities that it affords. And then lastly, what's so unique is the unbelievable generosity of the Rankin family. Obviously none of this would have happened without them, and I get misty-eyed thinking about it, the sacrifice. And really, I put Haywood and Sabina and Catherine and Charles on the highest of all high pedestals for conservation. So, Haywood, thank you for all that you have done. Sabina, Catherine, it's really been a profound joy to me to be involved in this, and I'm just really appreciative for the opportunity and thankful for all the people that contributed to it. So, Haywood, I think you're up next, so I'm going to turn the mic over to you. Thank you very much.
You're going to make me cry. Oof. This is a very special gathering for us. There are so many people to thank. Can you hear me? There's a way to do I'll just hold it. I'll start with a little bit of history. I meant to indicate to you all how on earth we got to this miraculous juncture where we are today. And I may use that word more than once, miraculous, because there's so many places it could have gone off the tracks in all these years. It started with my father, Forney Rankin. His family had actually just moved away from here when he was born. The land already in 1912 had been depleted by cotton. And anybody that was really ambitious left. His father moved to McCadville and was a builder there, although his older brothers were born just here. But he had a idée fixe, a passion about the place of his people, his ancestors. And it wasn't McCadville, it was here. And so when he was able, he started to acquire property. He was never a rich man, but he had the good fortune of not being afraid of debt. I have a phobia about debt. He was always laboring under massive mortgages because he was constantly buying land. It was a period, the late 40s and the 1950s. If it was exhausted in 1912, you can imagine what it was like in 1946, year of my birth. The land was depleted, and it was cheap. And so he was able to buy land that nobody wanted. People were just getting off it, working in the mills. So if you wonder, that's the first mystery. How on earth did a man like Forney Rankin get this much land? because nobody else really wanted. That was before anybody dreamed that Charlotte would start to become another Atlanta, you know, and that it would engulf Gaston County. This road, Hickory Grove Road, was an agricultural road even when I was growing up here. It's hard to imagine today, because today I think there's only one other farm on the 8 Mile Road that actually produces any hay, if you call it farming. So that's what we've come to in these years. So his insanity, if you like, is what built this place. But what I think really got the protection going was my mother, because they broke up. It was never a happy marriage, and after 40 years they broke up. The land was divided, and she was amenable to putting it under a conservation easement, something that nobody around here had ever heard of, and there was no entity then at the time that could hold a conservation easement. I found something in Washington where I was working at the time, the American Farmland Trust, that was willing to take it, rather reluctantly, because this is a long way from Washington. And we didn't have money for a stewardship grant, which is necessary for most conservation easements. The land trusts are not rich, and even to monitor property takes staff and it takes money. We didn't have the money for that. But that whole 150 acres around the lower bottom, which remains one of the most special places on the South Fork River, was put under a highly restrictive easement. That goes back all the way to 1983. A little before that, I had the idea of trying to sort of, after the divorce, the land was divided, try to reweave this property with all 5 children. That didn't work out. My father remained quite hostile to the idea. He was the old school. This was his land. His wife shouldn't have had any of it. He could do with it what he wanted, individual rights, that sort of mentality. And he was furious at the idea of a conservation easement or any sort of restrictions, because this was his land. And so that was not a particularly good decade in terms of trying to bring this property back together again and save it. And it looked quite bleak, to tell you the truth. I was not at all hopeful. But then he got older, which helps. And along about 1990, at which point he was approaching being 80 years old, he got the picture that this property was amazing. He understood that, and not from a developmental standpoint, but from its own sake, its own biological standpoint, and its own aesthetic standpoint. And he recognized we have a miraculous river. It's the only significant undammed river in the region. I don't think he knew anything about big leaf magnolia or special plants. He didn't have a whole lot about botanical knowledge, but he knew. He was a smart man. He knew. My mother certainly knew. Anyway, 3 of the children, Catherine and Charles and I, decided that we would team together, and we promised both of our parents that we would never make a dime off this property, and that we would always protect this property. That was a solemn undertaking on our part, and that we would do everything we could to hold it together long enough that we figured out how to do all that. There were not a lot of mechanisms then. The Catawba Lands Conservancy didn't exist until the 1990s. And then it came into existence, and it has made all the difference. The fact that we actually had a land trust in this area. The American Farmland Trust was only too happy to offload the easement it already had, and the Conservancy was very quick to work with both of my parents to put conservation easements on most of the rest. And so suddenly we found ourselves in the mid-90s with this property with conservation easements. Unfortunately, my father would only allow an easement that prohibited housing developments, which is, of course, the bottom line. They keep the bulldozers out and the housing. The monotonous desert of suburbia that we see all around us. That's the bottom line. But it didn't prevent tree cutting, indeed clear cutting, even of hardwoods, so fairly weak eastern section. So we still had some ways to go. Charles and Catherine and I had the vision that this property, and we even put in our wills with the help of Jim Stansel, hello Jim, that it would devolve to the Catawba Lands Conservancy on our depths, and that the Conservancy would just own the whole thing, because over the years the Conservancy had also acquired a lot of adjacent lands, especially along the river, thanks to the Clean Water Management Trust Fund, as Dave Cable alluded. And Charles died of cancer 2 years ago, and Catherine and I realized, well, we're getting older, we've got to do something. And the Conservancy quite rightly decided that it takes a substantial fund of money to preserve this place. We'd all like to think we could just wall it off, you know, and it would protect itself. But in fact, there are at least two types of dangers that are insistent. Now, the first is plant. I could give you an entire lecture on the invasive plants that I have now spent 15 years combating with some success, including getting rid of kudzu. Almost, I discovered little kudzu the other day. Anyway, and that's a lot of work. I just read in the New York Times that glyphosate and all these poisons are poisoning our water system and giving us all cancer. I don't know what to do about that. All I can say is if I hadn't had those herbicides, as well as some muscles to use with a weed wrench, Redlair today would be a desert of invasives. It's that fast. I don't know what we do about that. If you don't have these herbicides, somebody's going to have to figure that out. The other is human, with some help of some very key neighbors, starting with Don Bumgardner, the farmer who helped my father rehabilitate this place and then was a pillar to my mother from 1974 on, and made the open spaces on Redlair as beautiful as they are, and who, when I was away in furthest Arabia, and we had Hurricane Hugo, cleaned it up. Years and years of work. So Don and Dwayne Fulton, a neighbor to the north, and lots of others who are really committed to Redlair. Without those people, the place would not have the shape that it has, and we would not have been able to deal with the second problem, which is the human problem, which is the potential destructiveness that you sometimes get if things are not handled well. But and for those of you who are from the community, neighbors, thank you for coming. I know you probably have some questions. I think we all have questions about what is it going to be like when Redlair is owned by the government. I'm reminded, I caught they're metal thieves that go around and ransack places. And one was back here, or came up on him. I said, what are you doing here? Oh, well, we just saw this thing here, this old stove, we were just getting it. I said, okay, who said you could be here? Well, we thought this was government land. At the time, it wasn't government land, and now it is government land, which raises a slight problem. But I think we're going to be able to work that out. And to all of you who are here, who are neighbors, first of all, there was no choice. We're incredibly lucky. Think of all the landowners across this country who actually do love their land and have beautiful land and have no options for the future. No assurance of any kind that their place is going to be held together. In that sense, Redlair is really quite singular, because we've gone an entire step beyond conservation easements into ownership, which is surrounded by committees of dedicated scientific people who care about this place. And the money that we got through the partial sale of this, Catherine and I haven't kept a cent, all goes to a fund at the Foundation for the Carolinas. Catherine Warwick is here. Hello. She can tell you it's true. And so you put all that together, and we have, as Dave Cable so eloquently said, as near to a solution as you can get in this world in which we live. I myself spent a life in government, and I'm a great believer in government. I'm a great believer in the first place that what you were talking about, your grandchild, and you're talking about the long term. That's what Redlair is about. It's about the long term. And I don't see anybody else out there, except for government, taking care of the long term. Government and a non-governmental organization like the Conservancy. And so I'm personally very grateful that the government is involved with Redlair. I am so happy that the National Heritage Trust Fund, alas, it no longer exists, but that it did exist, and that one of its last acts, mercifully, was to spend money so that we could take that money and create a fund at the Foundation for the Carolinas that would help to protect this place, ultimately to hire, hopefully, a steward, somebody hopefully better than I am. And I think that is also part of the miracle which has happened here at Redlair. I could go on for hours, but that's the main thing I want to say.
Dr. Robert Peet. He is a professor of biology at the University of Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's also a very good friend of the Rankin. He'll be talking a little bit about the scientific aspect of Redlair. This working?
Good.
Well, I was asked to say a few words about the scientific, educational, and conservation value of this property, which I have been enjoying for quite a number of years now. First, I would like to be appreciative of the Plant Conservation Program and their preserve system, because they're building for us a library of biological diversity, providing resources for learning and for discovery well into the future. And we're really pleased that Redlair can now become part of that program. Each place is, of course, different. It has different scientific values and aesthetic values and historical values. So we can justify almost any place in some way, but Redlair is especially significant and distinctive. First off, as has been noted, it's a very large tract of land in an area where we don't have very many large tracts left. The Piedmont, as I discovered 40 years ago when I started studying the vegetation of the Carolinas, has been fragmented into small bits and pieces. We don't have big pieces left. So this is one of the best and biggest left in the Piedmont. We have something on the order of 1,200 acres with the Redlair property of 735 in the adjacent preserved conservation lands. Having something this large is really important to provide a viable population of all of the species we have here, enough individuals to keep the demographic and genetic diversity present. It provides a set of ecosystems which are stable because of the size and proximity of other places. And it provides an opportunity with the diversity of the landscape to have species move around as climate changes, as local conditions change. Now, the reason that this place caught the eye of the state initially was the plants. Big leaf magnolia is a really special thing, and here we have the biggest population of big leaf magnolia east of Alabama. So it's one of the 11 endangered species that the state recognizes of trees. And it's doing very well. If you take the walks today, you'll discover that there are many, many of them, that they're growing up out of the ravines where they have persisted for a long time and into the uplands. We have a few other important species, such as the Swinich sunflower, a federally endangered thing with only a handful of populations left. And I've actually only met 2 populations of it, one here and one in the Uwaris, where it's not just on a power line or a road right-of-way, where it's kept open in the original prairie-like conditions that characterized the Charlotte area 250 years ago. There's a lot more here, too. In just our casual wandering around of the property, we've counted well over 450 species of plants, and there must surely be 600 on the property altogether. Ecologically, the place is diverse. We have a lot of geologic formations underlying this, which results in very variable soil conditions. The soil can go from very acid, below pH of 4, to quite rich in pH over 6, so that's a very broad range. We have the topography going from the river up to the uplands. All told, we have perhaps, I think, 12 of the major forest types recognized by the Heritage Program occurring just on this upland property in the forests. Now the land, as Haywood said, has had some experience. There have been people here doing things with it. But if we look back at the aerial photos from 1938, we can really see that, well, around 40% of the property was always forested. It might have had cutting, but it was always forest. And much of the rest has been returning now to forest with the proximity of seed sources and the like, so that something on the order of 85% of the land is now forested landscape. In addition to the diversity of upland types, there's a lot of diversity of wetland types. We have, as was noted, the South Fork here, which is the only remaining significant undammed river of the region. We have something on the order of 12 miles of small streams and ephemeral streams on the property. Several ephemeral streams of a type that mostly we don't see anymore because you don't have the whole drainage protected. Many interesting species occur in these, and all of these habitats have been a resource for scientific endeavors. We've had theses written on the property, a number of regional institutions looking at soils, looking at plant physiology, looking at rocks, looking at aquatic things, looking at upland vegetation. Currently we have a project going on invasive species here. Well, it's a wonderful place, but it requires, as Haywood was just explaining, a lot of maintenance to keep a place like this going, which will provide us additional opportunities for research to discover how to maintain these sorts of things well. So in addition to keeping undesirable activities out, which the foundation will help by funding a steward in the future, we're going to have to be keeping an eye on the exotic species, keeping them out. Haywood's done a monumental job, but we have to be watching for the new ones that are coming in. There will be natural disturbance regimes to keep some of the areas open. We have to explore the importance of whether we want fire in some places to keep it open. We have to explore how to control deer populations. I've observed areas around the Durham area where I live get decimated by deer populations, so we've lost 50% of the species in some of the woodlands. So we have all of this to keep an eye on, and fortunately, I think with the help of the foundation, we'll be able to maintain some of the extra effort that's needed in an area like this. It was about 8 years ago we started an educational and research committee sponsored by CLC and the Rankins to coordinate research and education here. So everybody who did a research project here would put in an application. All of the classes that would come from many of the local schools would put in an application. We easily approved them, but we kept things coordinated so data could be shared, experience could be shared. We wouldn't have one project trampling on top of the other, and we wouldn't be putting too much damage on any particular piece of the land. And that committee is going to continue now with state supervision as part of the Redlair Stewardship Initiative. So we're very grateful for all of the local folks who have helped with that committee. Education has been an important part of this land for a long time. We're going to be controlling access so as not to trample the place, but nonetheless there'll be opportunities for school groups, for researchers and the like to come visit, and other sponsored events as well. Haywood has led a number of them, CLC has led a number of them, and we're very much expecting that this will continue well into the future and provide then a resource for people throughout the state and certainly within the region to experience what the landscape once looked like. So I'm really pleased to be here. I'm honored to be able to help with the stewardship committee, and I'm deeply grateful to everyone involved, the Rankin family, CLC, the state, and all the neighbors. So thank you very much.
Rob Evans, who's the ecologist for plant conservation, the plant conservation program, he has initiated
work for me? Well, like everyone else has said, I'm truly honored to be here and pleased to be part of this thing. The first time I heard about Redlair was several years ago when I got a mysterious call from Bob. And I was like, what are we talking about? And we had a couple meetings, and it was the first experience I had hearing about Redlair. And as you've all heard about, I won't go back into the significance because you know how significant this is to all of you and to us. But I was brought over here and got the occasion to ride with Catherine and Bob over here one day. And I look at this right now as a marriage between the state plant conservation program, the Department of Agriculture, and the Rankin family and neighbors. And I felt like I was almost like the groom-to-be. As I rode over with Bob and Catherine, I felt like I was almost like being interviewed to see if I was an acceptable member of the family. And sitting in the living room in there with Haywood and Sabina one evening and talking through all that, it was quite an occasion. But I paid them back a little bit by forcing them to sit through a PowerPoint of mine one evening or one morning in the living room, and I think made Sabina late for school that one particular morning. But again, this is a great site. You've heard about why it's such a great site. You'll get to see why it's such a great site if you go on one of the little walks. But we're so pleased to be a part of this partnership. And this is, I will remind everyone, this is just one partnership that we're trying to build statewide, to build a preserved system that the state can be proud of, to protect the plant heritage that we have here. And I know that's something the Commissioner and Dr. Reich have talked about. This is all part of keeping this a state that we know and love. And right here is one of the key sites for it. So again, thank you all for coming. I'm just so glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
So our last formal speaker is Tom Okel. He is the Executive Director for the Catawba Lands Conservancy. And he's going to be talking a bit about same thing, different flavors. So here's Tom.
Thank you. And there's really not a lot to add to some of the great comments that have already been made, but I will say a few things, and I promise I'm last and I'll be brief. But I'm going to speak on behalf of the Catawba Lands Conservancy, and I know some of you are visitors. Most of you know we're the local land trust that operates in this area, and for me to speak on behalf of the Conservancy, Dave Cable was so much a part of that history, and it's Haywood, it's Catherine, it's Frank Bragg, it's such a great group of people. But I don't think I can overstate how critical Redlair has been in the evolution and the success of the Catawba Lands Conservancy. And CLC is just over 20 years old, and Redlair has really been the signature property that's moved the Conservancy along throughout its history. It's truly our signature property. And when you go through the community and you say you're involved with the Conservancy, most people, if they don't really know the Conservancy, will say, oh, I know about Redlair. That's the connection. And it's amazing to me that while we've enjoyed that connection and really leveraged off that, it really is interesting when you think about that, as Haywood said, the original core easements that make up Redlair weren't held by the Catawba Lands Conservancy. They were put in place by Haywood's father, held by the American Farmland Trust. And as CLC got more established, those were assigned to the Catawba Lands Conservancy. And at that time, the organization was less than 70 acres of protected property. And just with that assignment, it went to over 800 acres. So you can truly say that Redlair put the Catawba Lands Conservancy on the map in terms of land conservation. And from that base, working with the family, working with other neighbors, working with some properties that the Conservancy bought, this is now part of what is a 1,500 acre conservation area. So by far our biggest conservation area, and the biggest conservation area in this part of the state other than state parks. So it truly is something amazing. And you've heard today, most of you have seen it, you know how special this is with the beauty and the unique topography, rich biodiversity. So it's easy to understand why this has become the touchstone for our mission. And I think that's amplified by the fact that we're just a few miles from the Mecklenburg County line. So we're right almost at ground zero for all of the sprawl that's coming out of Charlotte. And if you, I hope you all have the chance someday. If you hike to the top of Spencer Mountain, you can really see that. You can look and you can see this island, luckily a big island of green. and you can see Charlotte in the background, you can see the airport, and you can see all the development that has come around and is now moving on past Redlair, and it really is a great depiction of how important this is, as everyone has said this afternoon. But, and this has been touched on, but it's really hard when we talk about Redlair and its impact and the impact for our organization to separate the land from the family and the owners. And Haywood and Catherine and their family have been such an inspiration, I think, to everybody involved in our work. They have been such a great example of conservation in its purest form. They've helped us understand the urgency of our mission, and they've shown us what can be accomplished with tremendous sacrifice. Haywood has set a standard of stewardship that most of us will never be able to live up to, but it certainly has set a tone that's impacted our whole organization and the properties that we work on throughout our whole area. And I think the other thing that Haywood has really taught us and taught me is, Dave alluded to this, but conservation, the legal act of putting something in protection is just such a small, maybe insignificant part of conservation, and it is such a long, committed, ongoing, daily act. And I learned that my first week in this job, and it was the first time I had met Haywood and been out here, and we went on a lovely, one of Haywood's 1 hour hikes. It was about 3 hours when we got back. And I thought it was light, and this was just looking at some great work that was finished for the Conservancy. And we stood right here by my car, and I was getting in, and he had healthy skepticism, which I think he still has, as to whether I'm up for this job, which is good. That helps me. But he looked at me and he said, "You know, you're the only thing standing between Redlair and bulldozers." And he was serious. And that was my first sleepless night in my new position. But to that end, it is so great. I'm so excited about this partnership with Plant Conservation and Rob. I'm not sure in his analogy if we're the bride or a brother-in-law or what in that mix. But I'm so thankful this group of people, Bob, Peet, Dave Cable, Jim Stansel, the whole team that came together to make this happen. It's really special, and it's an exciting chapter for us. And one person that we really should mention, because none of this would have happened without the involvement of Mike Leonard, who is a real pioneer for conservation across the state, and he was on the board of the Natural Heritage Trust Fund, he's on the board of the Conservation Fund, and he played a critical role in helping us raise money from Fred and Alice Standback that made this possible. And I talked to Mike this afternoon, and unfortunately, he wanted to be here. Something came up, but he just sent me an email, and I thought I would just share his comments with you to wrap things up. Let's see. So, Mike said, "One of the greatest blessings of my life is being able to assist the state of North Carolina and others in protecting such places as Redlair for the future. One of the highlights of the past year or so was being able to visit Redlair when the big leaf magnolia were in bloom, and being able to see the looks of joy on the faces of my wife, Michelle, and my daughter, Iris, as they got some close-up looks at a few of those dinner-sized plate blossoms. But perhaps even more important is the blessing of getting to know and being able to work with Haywood and Sabina Rankin, whose passion for Redlair and incredible generosity truly made this happen. I've worked with many dedicated and generous people in the 34 years that I've been actively involved in land conservation, but I would put the two of them near the top." So I think that's a great way to wrap it up, and I guess I will pass it back over to David.
Thank you, Tom. I'm wondering if you are ready for a little bit of drama, I guess. Tom mentioned some hikes that we'll be explaining, but before we we're explaining about some different hiking options. But before we do so, you might have been wondering what's behind here. Is there another beautiful picture? It's actually it's a mock-up sign of the Plant Conservation Program Preserve sign that will be once we get the bureaucratic wheels moving, we'll be erecting several of these in strategic areas throughout the preserve. we hope that I think I can now pass this off to someone who knows about the hike. But just as some housekeeping, there are some refreshments over here, which I might suggest you pass by before going on to a hike. There's going to be various levels of commitment here, so I'll let Haywood explain.
Well, I'm a little sorry that Tom said what he said, but I don't always promise a 1 hour hike and go on 3 hours, although it has been known to happen. I like to do what I think people in the group want to do. We actually, what I would recommend is anybody that can go at all, just go down the bottom of the hill. We have a tree that has a big leaf magnolia blossom on it. Your alternative is go to the Belmont Abbey, where they have lots of big leaf magnolias. They're planted. It's true you've got a lot of highway noise, but if your interest is in blossoms. But we do have one of our own. It's a little early in this particular cold season for the big leaf magnolia. At that point, we can see how many people want to go further and how much further. There's several different people that can lead walks. If you go to what we call the Stone Farm, Martha Udy's George Stone's daughter knows this better than anybody. There's a whole creek bottom lined with big leaf magnolias, none at nose level. The big leaf magnolia is a little bit like the tulip poplar. It's got a nice flower, but in nature, unlike at Belmont Abbey, in nature they tend to be quite high. So I'm afraid we only have one at nose level for you today, and that's just down the hill. But we have a whole forest full of big leaf magnolias, and some are blooming, and we can walk as little or as much as people want. First, you might want to get some refreshments, and then those of you who can head down the hill and look at the show tree, and everybody can come back, or some people can go on shorter or longer walks as you desire.
I think we'll probably divide up initially into 3 piles of people, and then we can split them up more if you'd like. Most everyone